Aaron.
Every time that thing counts down, I'm just like hoping and praying that someone else will show up on the other side of the screen. Never works. Apparently,
Nope.
I'm not right with the Lord.
Nope, it's me again. You have had a brief hiatus from seeing my face on the other side
It's
of
been
the screen.
delightful.
Yeah.
This is your Christmas gift to me.
Yeah. It's been a minute. It's since before Thanksgiving. So it's been weeks, I want to say.
Weeks.
You know, we've been caught up in other things. How are things going up north? What have you been up to?
It's snowy here, as you can see. I have mini shirts and sweaters on, and
they say layering is very important when you live up north, especially as you do.
Yeah, it also helps with my body type too, to wear dark colors that are, I've been I have a fun crypto project.
Oh, crypto. I'm told, I'm a fuddy-duddy old man, but I'm told
You're a crypto hater.
I think I've heard all the cool kids are into the cryptos, as is my barber and my dentist, and that's when you know that something's mainstream when people are talking about which crypto investments they have at your barber shop. But Tone, what's going on? What are you doing with crypto?
Well, years ago, I did tried my hand at crypto mining.
Right.
But then I just remembered how much I don't like running a data center.
Fair enough. Yeah.
It was okay. Back in the day, it was a little more lucrative, though.
Yeah, correct.
Then I bought a fair amount of Bitcoin and Ethereum, etc. At some point, it was a good investment. You were using that term earlier, and I was like, that's not an investment. That's not a real thing. No. And that did okay, but like I feel like
maybe any more than ponies are an investment at the racetrack.
Yes. So I don't really do much of that anymore. I did well because I kind of had some early, but now people are dumping boatloads of money, hoping that cycle repeats itself. Color me skeptical.
Got it.
This is some of these coins are the most fiat of all fiat currencies.
If by fiat you mean Ponzi scheme.
At least with the US dollar, there's some shred of organization backing it up, other than Aaron in his basement who made this crypto.
Yeah. I feel like this is turning into a very different podcast right now that it's been.
We'll get back on track, Reese.
Yeah.
No, I'm just doing frequency trading, just in the hey, buy low, sell high.
Yeah, I could see, and that might involve that might tie in some of your lifelong interests and writing little Python scripts that do cool stuff and automating things. And
my inability to provide value in a profession just translates into small Python scripts.
I love it. Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds like fun. We could have done a whole show on that. Probably would get a lot more clickbaity than today's topic of
right.
Section 889. I don't know about you, but when I see DOD,
drags in all the cool kids, man.
Yeah.
But it's been a fun week for me. It's been a fun week for Section 889 equipment, and I'm going to explain why.
Well, let's do our intro, and then we'll dive
after these messages.
Yeah, Section 889. After this message from our sponsors. Here we go. All right. So you were saying Section 889.
Section 889. Robot Aaron. So I don't, I've got some stuff I can present, but
Yeah.
I feel like this is more like a conversational piece.
Yeah, let's talk about
Like
it.
I'm gonna write a coffee table book on Section 889 equipment. So you can just, talk to your friends about it.
Uh,
So I'm gonna start with a story though, because
mm,
I know how much you like Uncle Aaron's
mm.
story time. So back in the day before we cared about cybersecurity, you remember those days?
Like yesterday for most people. Yeah.
So last week I was
Yeah.
no, this is probably 12 or so years ago.
Right. Yeah.
We would bring in equipment and we'd test it in a Faraday cage and look at what kind of wireless electromagnetic signals that it was emitting.
Hmm.
And most of the time that was just because we're packing it so densely into a data center that we kind of just don't want, negative effects on communication traffic. Anyway, so we detect this interesting 900 megahertz signal and we're like, what's that? And what we find out is that it is a particular chipset made by a particular company that happened to be embedded in a motherboard in a server. And these
Mm.
servers would create this vestigial network between each other over 900 megahertz. It was pretty low speed.
Hmm.
And they would talk to each other and they would figure out which one of the servers was attached to the internet, and then
Hmm.
they'd relay traffic between each other from this vestigial network and call home. Okay. And I was like, son of a gun. We can't swear on this, can we?
No.
The FCC will shut us down.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it happened to be this particular equipment manufacturer. And I was like, I'm never buying anything from them again. And people were like, Shaver, that's crazy. You're just a conspiracy theorist.
Stuff like
And
that doesn't happen.
that doesn't happen. And lo and behold, in 2019, the US federal government banned this equipment. People still buy it and use it. And they're like, this is cheap. What could go wrong?
Yeah.
And so in 2019, there was the National Defense Authorization Act, specifically the John S. McCain National Defense Authorization Act. And it's a big old deal. Not going to get into all of it, but specifically Section 889 of the National Defense Authorization Act lays out a list of equipment and vendors who make equipment that cannot be sold to the US federal government. And if you can get into the legalese of it, but there's all these clauses that are like, and if you provide services to the federal government, or if your cousin's brother provides services to the federal government, you're not allowed to use it either.
Right.
And
so you're processing some data for them, maybe, or you're designing toilets that are going to go into somebody's submarine or whatnot.
or a government office, maybe a chair that goes into a government office building, or like the tentacles are far reaching. But outside of that, right, and there are penalties and blah blah blah, right, about don't do bad stuff. And people are like, we don't, whatever, we're not going to get caught, or plus we don't care, that doesn't apply to us. But there's like a moral to this story for me of there's a reason. Sometimes the government does things, and now Shaver's like, I don't feel like I understand the reason behind this.
Yeah.
This one, I understand the reason behind. And so I feel like it's a thing.
Maybe it goes back to that story you shared earlier about things that communicate in unexpected, surprising, and maybe undocumented ways.
Right. And so the original ban was on 5 companies. Okay. And it's Huawei, ZTE, Hytera, Dahu, and one that I can't pronounce. Forgive me. My Midwestern accent won't allow me to.
Well, is Hikvision in your...
Well, Hikvision happens to be owned by one of these companies. Okay. So there's all these like sub brand names that they like spin off under stuff. And then it was just updated this year. And now there's a whole list, and there's like 19 companies that are banned. And then it even goes into to say that that the Secretary of I'm just going to read this because I won't say it right. That the Secretary of Defense designates entities that are owned or controlled or otherwise connected to the government of a covered foreign country. Okay, so they list these specific countries, and we can all imagine who they are. And if
Latvia, Iceland,
Costa Rica,
Costa Rica, better.
yeah, yes,
The Bahamas. That's where I should have started. Yeah,
British Virgin Islands, I think specific. No,
no,
we know
right.
who they are. Not going to
Yeah.
pick on them here. This is not about picking on those particular countries. It's just stuff happens, right?
Yeah.
And we're finding more and more lists. And so that's my story about this leading up to this week. And Shaver is always the like ringing the bell, right? Like, hey, you've got this on your network, or hey, don't use this stuff. And people are like, that's not a problem. This is going to end up just fine. Then
they wouldn't sell this stuff on Amazon if it was unsafe.
Right. Amazon will protect us. So what happens is we're going to get into Hikvision specifically, but I'm going to touch on a couple other ones too that people don't realize. So Hikvision makes high definition cameras and DVRs that go with them. Hikvision falls under this category. And what happens is people buy industrial process equipment. And the more that it's automated, the more we put these cameras in it, and we use computer vision to detect, these holes are offset, or something bad happened, or something good happened. And Hikvision is one of these banned pieces of equipment, banned companies, a sub brand. And I've told you this well in the past, like what would be a better place to embed a piece of technology if you're trying to capture intellectual property? Because in the industrial process equipment, it's just like, I don't need to steal your blueprints. I just take high definition photos of this, right?
Yeah.
So then this week, a specific CVE gets sent out. Fortinet found this. And we are on 36260 is the specific CVE for those who are interested. And, it's being used to not only exfiltrate data, right? There's been question marks around that for a long time. But now these Hikvision cameras that attach to the cloud open an SSL tunnel through the firewall. And the firmware that these cameras are downloading is now pushing particular versions of MooBot. So not only are they part of MooBot, they're the infection vector for this equipment this code being pushed out.
Which I just want to take a little pause there, because I go back, we joked about last week, people have been caring more and more and more about cybersecurity, of course, but I go back a year or two or three ago, and you would talk about like corporate IT security versus the security of other assets. And when I would talk about IoT devices, these little wonky, cheap devices like thermostats and cameras and, whatever, lighting control systems, and people like,
that's not a problem.
That's not your, that's not your threat vector, basically. Like yes, theoretically, but all
the wall clock could be,
but all the incidents are happening on our corporate PCs. But that to me is a semi-large indication of, I have this sense of like, people keep targeting corporate traditional PCs because most of the attackers are pretty lazy. What's the least amount of work I need to do, and so I'll just keep
get you to click on a link.
I'll just keep, getting you to click on stuff, and I'll keep recompiling the same malware that I've been using on. But, once people open up these new pathways, or once you start being semi-effective of, making even a little bit hard to get into a corporate network through,
they kind of move on to the
it's like, oh, okay, we got to find some other trick to base our stuff on. And not to mention, there are the criminal actors who are super lazy And then there are the sort of government entity actors who
You're
are,
gonna upset criminal actors by calling them super lazy. They're gonna come after you.
yeah, probably. There are more reasons than that I've upset some of those people, but we won't go into that. But yeah, no, this to me feels like I'm with you on ringing the bell. Feels like kind of a big deal that I mean, we've had these IoT vectors before, but that sounds a little bit bigger in scope and scale than what
It
we've talked
is.
about
It
before.
really is. And I think the extra troublesome part of it is I don't think people know whether they have this equipment or not. I don't think they
Well,
know how to tell whether
yeah,
like is that chipset built into my server?
yeah,
Is it an IoT device out on my shop
yeah,
floor? Is it in an ATM? I don't think they know how to detect it.
right. Well, and in they're both the white labeling that you mentioned of, or not white labeling, I guess, but more Hikvision or whatever embedded in a
They changed the
freestanding.
name of it. Yeah.
Correct. But also, I will say white labeling that, from what I understand, back when I looked at it, there are about 20 or 30 camera brands you could buy that are, in fact, it's all the same stuff with
Right.
a different logo and name put
Same
on it.
code, same.
It's the
Yeah.
same stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
So that I guess that would be a challenge maybe I'd put out to our 1.67 listeners. Is like how are you going to detect that this is not just happening, but what's your stance on the banned equipment?
yeah.
Does the rule apply to you? Is it just good practice and hygiene to go clean that up? Because it's clear people don't know they have this stuff in their environment, and I think taking a stance on it, knowing what your corporate appetite is for this, because a lot of times this is brought in by third-party vendors.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
somebody that made.
yeah, and I would wonder too. So as we know, the kinds of ways that the stuff will come into the organization, there's traditional IT purchasing of like,
Mhm.
what will I put in my data centers? And, that kind of review. And hopefully we have some controls on that. Although I know the Huawei telecommunications gear is one of those, or even, there was this, kind of a weird discussion, but it was the sort of white label server boxes that, especially when you have like appliances that you buy from a small company,
Hmm.
who's the producer of those. But, we're having more and more, it seems like the non IT tech stuff is growing exponentially faster and is being plugged into our networks, whether we realize it or not. We
Well,
build,
and there's
yeah,
no procurement process for it,
no,
like in general, because when we're buying IT gear, we're actually buying the componentry, right? Like I'm buying a server, I'm buying a PC, I'm buying a camera. But like when you're getting this stuff in industrial systems or IoT or OT, it's not like someone's out buying a camera. They just like bought this machine
yeah. They bought a solution in a lot of
that has
cases.
all these essential components in it, and those essential
Yeah,
components never don't individually go through some kind of procurement thing. And
yeah,
I've been around the block on this one a few times, and you go to these opposite ends of the spectrum of like, well, nobody can put anything on the shop floor unless it's approved by IT and the procurement. And that is the fastest way to shoot your career in the head as an IT person. Because like,
yeah.
oh, so we can't make stuff
Can't,
without Brian's
can't manufacture stuff because of IT. Got
because
it.
I don't have Brian's approval.
Yeah,
Yeah. The other
approval.
so then what we see IT people or security people do is like, you can't do anything about it then. Just I guess do stuff,
Yeah,
right? Put whatever you want out there. I think there's this middle ground, like where we can't necessarily stop it from coming into our environment. Like if you think you can just build this process to eliminate the potential of this coming in, you're wrong. I don't think that can happen.
yeah,
So like the question is like, how do you detect it and then alert somebody like prior to, some kind of event triggering in a sim saying, bad traffic's happening here. How do you detect that this crap even exists? And then what are you going to do about it, right? So it's like a little incident response planning pre-incident. The incident is this crap's on my network. And
Yeah.
is it I make people take it off the network, like you can't have that? Or do I have a special network for gross stuff that I isolate it to and say you just don't get to touch anything while you live here?
That last thing you said feels like more work, and yet it seems more realistic. Again, I just bought this. I just spent $10 million on this whole factory automation,
Right.
factory control stuff. Nope, gotta install that stuff. Can't use it. Yeah, good luck with that.
Well, so that's where you kind of have to go hunting for this stuff and be like, you're not supposed to be over here on this network. Get out of here. You got to go over to this other one that's for stuff we don't like or don't trust, or so and mostly what I find is folks just have a big giant flat network. So back to, you get tired of hearing about that from me.
Yeah, we talk about that a bunch. Yeah,
I don't even talk about network segmentation. So let's take it beyond the Hikvision cameras. One thing that I found really interesting is I think QNAP and Synology are having a sale on their hardware because as of late, like the amount of this technology, like as far as so we've switched from cameras to network attached storage, is like just skyrocketing. One, people are just implementing it totally incorrectly.
You and I, not on this channel, but we've talked about QNAP and Synology stuff, and I guess I have a little more experience with just wacky IT environments that
right.
I'm like, yeah, no, QNAP and Synology, no, that's a thing.
So like especially the Synology thing, like we're just seeing like it's a hockey stick in the amount of these things people are implementing. So probably there's, not to pick on the Synology salesperson, but I don't know. However this is happening, or they're getting
there isn't one. I mean,
there's a deal.
That's why you're seeing so much of it. That
they're available on Amazon.
There's some Best Buys you could go to and buy QNAP and Synology gear. Yeah.
So these are just Linux servers, right?
Yeah.
And they come with
everything turned on.
Like universal plug and play, mount all, and like anyway, but outside of it not being hardened, here's the interesting thing I found. One, both of those companies are owned by or affiliated with a government that falls under Section 889. So if you read the rule of this affiliation and the Secretary of Defense's, they are not, however, listed. They're not listed as one of the companies. Okay, so there's that. You could take it for what it's worth. That's like theoretical. Recently, all right, there's been a large uptick in a particular malware that targets Synology and QNAP arrays. And they're doing a really, really interesting thing to it. Because one thing folks are bad at is monitoring all the performance metrics of a storage array. A lot of what's the first thing you think of you monitoring a storage array?
Well, like disk utilization would be
read-write operations, sync latency, I/O performance. Right. So they don't go after any of that. Basically, they just use the Linux kernel and the CPU inside of these things to do Bitcoin mining.
Oh, yeah. Well, and by the way, helpfully, I think both of those have included, because they include everything that you could possibly ever want to run on those. And it is just a Linux kernel. But they have a built-in webby way to
super webby
to run virtual instance, that there
so you can do like fast recovery.
Well, no, that you could run like, you want to run a virtual Windows box on this to do whatever. Yeah, that it's
it's got like a hypervisor. Yeah, so you can like, a lot of times it's so you can restore an image, like, this crashed and let's restore it right on the storage array. Right. So it is just a server, but the thing is, these things ship with universal plug and play, which inherently allows me, just as an unauthenticated user, to push commands to the storage array to tell it to reconfigure itself.
Yeah.
And then we load malware on there and use all the CPU up to do Bitcoin mining, and that's seen some massive increase. So if you have these things, and it would seem as though everyone does, I feel left out. I don't have a Synology NAS. Yeah, you should definitely go make sure you have CPU monitoring enabled on this
Yeah.
thing, and also don't be gross and harden your NAS.
Well, I've come dangerously close. I have a bit of a confession here, which I have come dangerously close to buying one of those Synology and or QNAP boxes, just to put down in the basement to run the local network. But then, I thought better of it and said, I can build my own wacky Linux boxes.
Yeah.
And
Like, again, I'm not hating on it. I understand.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it's just we don't have the money, et cetera, et cetera. I get it. But, it's like when something's too good to be true, like it seems, like a too good to believe value. Like we probably need to dig into it a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's section 889, and there's great ways and crappy ways to go hunt for this stuff and see if you have it. So I suppose we could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
How would you find this stuff in your environment?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this comes back to, at the highest level, it's inventory, which is, not a fun answer for people, but like if you had a perfect inventory process of, what comes into your organization and gets plugged in, you would have a good sense of it. If you presume, reality, then you need some sort of, in addition to the formal, sort of how do we handle things as they're purchased, and then how do we handle things as they're plugged in, and have good knowledge of what that stuff is. If we also assume failure, you're going to have to do that. You're going to have some sort of scanning process in place to look for new inventory and then to interrogate it. And, classically in the past, that's been, you go back into the olden days, some sort of Nmap type scanning, to then try to figure out what it is. We're big fans of, we don't talk about products a lot, but you and I are big fans, of course, of, Rumble is sort of the pinnacle right now of network discovery scanning, as far as I'm concerned. So, I think but boils down to network-based scans, that you got to look for the stuff and have something in place that can help identify those things with some intelligence to it. Is there, you have something else in mind, or?
No, I think you're on the right track. Like, whether, who cares the particular product, as long as you have an effective mechanism for going out and hunting for these.
Yeah.
Like just like we do, hunting for indicators of compromise inside of, a SIM in our database of security telemetry. How do we do, hunting for these particular types of assets and vulnerabilities before something bad happens?
Right.
And, that's a challenge to do that inside of a SIM, because we know that in most companies, they don't have any large percentage of their data flowing into their SIM. And so you kind of have to have a mechanism to go out and hunt for it, because I bet this stuff's being dropped in your environment faster than you can even inventory it with your little clipboard that you walk around with. So,
well, and even that, you and I have run into more environments, I think, than we would have expected, where we just say easily your environment, where people, not only can they not define what's on their network, they may have great difficulty defining what their environment is. That the number of times where we've had people say, here are my network ranges. I'll have all 10.0 network, they're all in the 10 address space. And you and I are doing a little bit of work and say, what about this 192.168 stuff? Well, we don't have that.
We don't have that. Why are all these, Konica Minolta printers on their own network over here? Why do they have routing, all that stuff? Yeah.
And so even that require, to have the ability to discover those new networks, to have the ability to see, you mentioned that Fortinet 36260 vuln that's out there, and to be able to go and say, how would I know if I have that in my environment? That's a whole capability that I think you got to have. Or if you're doing section 889, and definitely that list, I didn't realize the list had expanded, kind of shows what I know. But to be able to go and say, do we have these things, and if asked, or if I'm asked to certify that I don't, what's that based on? Is that I don't remember purchasing one of those.
Right. Okay.
Well, I laugh in saying that, but I think that's how most people would answer a questionnaire like that. Or is it no, even periodically, even just once a year or once a quarter, I'm going and searching for those things and saying, yeah, no, I don't have that.
I don't have any.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like we've exhausted this topic and our listeners.
I think we may have killed it dead. So
well,
awesome.
maybe in 6 weeks I'll talk to you again.
Yeah. If you're unlucky,
or maybe next week.
Yeah, if you're unlucky, maybe it will be sooner. But
okay.
Good topic. Take care, man. Stay warm. Yeah, bye.
Bye.